Feast your eyes, ladies and gentlemen. I've been wanting to get my hands on a USOptics optic. Yeah, that's right. For quite some time. In fact, since I got into shooting, I knew their history. Developed in '91 out in California, they set out to make some of the highest end optics possible. American made, rugged, tough, military stuff. Great, great, great. And I just could never find one that I could afford. Well, this guy popped up recently and I just couldn't say no, especially considering I'm on this medium powered variable optics sort of kick. And this thing, being a 1 to 10 by 37, is right in that ballpark of where I want to be. However, how does this quite old discontinued optic stack up with some of its modern rivals? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Well, not quite just yet. First, let's take a look and see how well this thing is constructed before we look through it and see what we got going on. Right off the bat, this thing has some heft to it. You can really tell that this is made out of some much thicker material as opposed to some modern optics. 30.5 ounces sounds really heavy, and you know what? It is compared to most optics, but to make you understand that it's not really terrible, this 3 to 18 by 50 Meopta Optica 6 comes in just over 0.6 of an ounce heavier. So it's not really out of the realm of acceptable weight. However, if you compare it to something like this Trijicon Credo 2 to 10, you can see it's a massive 7-ounce weight savings. However, you do not buy this for the weight savings. Oh no, you buy this for the durability. I once watched a US Optics showcase video where a salesman took an optic like this, threw it up in the air as high as he could. It hit the ground, they took it, they mounted it on a rifle, and made hits out to several hundred yards. That's why you buy one of these things. And that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about this, because I love things that are durable and bulletproof. And right off the bat, this thing feels bulletproof. Starting at the back, we have a fast focus eyepiece. This is extremely tight. Despite how old this is and how used it is, I can't really see many signs of wear, but you can tell it's been around the block a couple of times. Pulling it all the way out, turning it about half a turn, this is rock, and I mean rock solid. I'm pretty sure I could bash this against my table and not have to worry about dislodging anything. It feels incredible. Very, very tight to turn. From there, we have the magnification ring, which, despite the fact it doesn't have a throw lever, has this very aggressive knurling to it. You could file your nails down with it if you wanted to, and that is great because if you had gloves on or your hands are sweaty, you can grab this and turn it very easily. It's significantly better than most modern magnification rings, despite, something having a throw lever. You can see 1.8 is at 12 o'clock and 10 is right over here, probably like around 8 o'clock. So it is a massive amount of rotation required to go from minimum to maximum magnification. So if I end up keeping this, a throw lever is going to be in its future no matter what. But as far as how this thing feels, fantastic. Almost as damped as the fast focus eyepiece, but it's so smooth. Oh, it's fantastic. Exactly what you want. Now, next I would usually go to the illumination controls, but they're up here. So we're going to come onto the side and take a look at our side focus. Goes down to 30 yards, out to well past infinity, as you can see, almost 360 degrees. Again, this is pretty smooth, but it's a little bit more worn in, I would say, as opposed to either the fast focus eyepiece or the magnification controls. However, it's still nice and smooth. That was actually my wrist cracking, not the optic. And it feels good other than how soft it is. But I'm not overly concerned about this whatsoever. Its illumination controls are a little bit different. This is an older style optic. I think they've switched over to a single push button illumination control, which probably works. But you know what? This thing works so far really well. You have the power button on top, which you can't really tell that you're pressing it, but you press it once and it goes on. You press it again, it shuts off. Up and down arrows over here, they're a little hard to get to. If you have gloves on, forget it. You're almost not going to be able to control this thing. But the controls so far seem fairly intuitive, and from my playing around with this thing, it works fairly well. Battery compartment, as you can see, has this cap that comes off. Slide the controller with your standard CR2032 battery underneath it. You have 2 contacts on top, 2 little guide pins on the side to line this up, and It's as easy as that. Now, let's focus on the turrets on this thing. These are the EREK turrets. These are non-locking, unfortunately, but not, again, the end of the world. They are low profile, which is one of the things that really set these apart from other optics during the time, because to have target turrets, they're usually gigantic. These were always nice and streamlined. And as you can see, perfect visibility of it when you're behind the thing. Getting behind it, let's give this in a couple of twists. Doesn't line up 100%, but I could tweak this a little bit if need be. But look at how tight that is. There is no wiggle. Once you're in the D10, it just clicks right out of it. For the windage, you can see this one is capped. We pop that off. We have a very simple little knob over here with right and left indications, so it's basically idiot-proof. Again, very little to no play, and then it just clicks. Before we look through it, let's just admire how this optic looks. It just looks so industrial and so beefy. The anodizing on it, it looks rough, but it's not really that rough. You can see with my fingernails, it takes a lot to really have it come through, and then it wipes right off. It feels hard. It feels thick and strong, like you can just use this as a hammer to drive nails. I really hope this looks and performs as good as it looks. Unfortunately, I had noticed after I had gotten this thing mounted up and got behind it that the image looked really foggy, like really, really foggy. This picture shows a little bit of what I was contending with. That is actually fog and gunk that had built up on the inside of the lens. Apparently what had happened was the argon that this thing is filled with to prevent any sort of condensation, basically an inert gas that doesn't change whatsoever, had leaked out, and thus moisture had gotten in. I don't really know how this happened, but that meant that this scope got a free trip to USO to get checked up. And in fact, my experience with dealing with US Optics from a warranty standpoint was spectacular. Basically as good as Vortex, if not better. They emailed me immediately. I got responses within 24 hours. They got it. They repaired the entire thing. They serviced every single component inside, cleaned it, checked it, spec'd it out, and got it back to me in less than 3 weeks. And they paid for the return shipping. The individuals that I dealt with were more than happy to answer any questions that I had and could not do enough for me. So, if you're worried about USO's warranty experience, don't. They were absolutely top tier fantastic. However, there is something else that I need to address, and that is going to be the tunneling effect. I've experienced this before on some other optics, but nothing as dramatic as I've experienced on this scope. Reading the text before you basically says that they do not use a aperture disc inside to mitigate this. What this ultimately does by them not using the disc is offer a larger field of view in the higher magnifications and thus a little bit more resolution. So that means at 10x we should have a very large field of view. However, at 1.8x, or at least the lower magnifications, we're going to see a lot more of the scope body. So let me let that live for you a little bit. At 1.8x, you can see the massive amount of scope body that we see before us. Now, if they had used that aperture disc inside of this, this wouldn't be here. But at the higher end of the magnification, we'd have a supposedly less field of view. Crank the magnification to about 3x, and guess what? The image fills itself out into the scope body quite nicely. And what we are left with is a more than reasonable amount of scope body when we look through it here at 10x. The mill gap reticle is very simple. It's basically a slightly fancy mill reticle. And honestly, I quite like it. It's very simple, it's robust, you could pick it up at the minimum and the maximum magnification just fine. The flashing of the illumination is just the refresh rate of the LED emitter. You'll notice the flashing depending on what my camera settings are given our ambient light. When the refresh rate is higher, or thus the shutter speed is higher, you won't notice it as much. But down here, because we're in very low light, basically a pitch black room, you're going to notice it a lot more. The illumination, however, gets very bright, and the steps between minimum to maximum are nicely spaced out. The ring down here at minimum magnification at maximum brightness is something that you are going to notice if the illumination is too bright for the area that you're in. This is not the first time we've seen something like it, however, it is probably the most noticeable. There's good feel and good sound coming from these turrets. I also like how large they are in diameter because it gives a much easier purchase area and gives you a little bit more finite ability when you want to make an adjustment. Sometimes if the knob's too small, you got to make a minor adjustment and you end up making a major one. With this, you could really fine tune each one of those clicks. The brightness on this MPVO is among the brightest I've ever gotten my hands on. USO really does not play around. Also, that haze that you see when the emitter is a little bit too bright, this is from when before I sent it in to get repaired. So that's the image that you would see basically all the time. It had a slight haze to it. Regardless of that fact, down here, it still produces a pretty good image. And also take a look at that mil gap reticle. It lines up to my target perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 by 5 is perfect. Should have adjusted the side focus a little bit better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's perfect. I actually have to adjust the camera settings because it's a little bit too bright. Continue downwards. 10, 10, 10, 10, and 10. Looks like it might be about 0.1 of a mil off at 10 mils, which is only 1%. That is not half bad considering this thing has been abused quite significantly. And it returns to 0 with absolutely no surprises there. I tested this again after I got it back and it gave the exact same performance. 1% is basically nothing. So far there's a lot to like about this thing. The build quality, the overall fit, finish, and feel are definitely justifying the price. Again, when you could find these things brand new, around $2,000 is not a small amount of money. However, on the used market, well, if you could even find these things, it took me over a year to find this one. They're around $1,000, or at least that's what I paid for this. But it also came with a mount, which was pretty sweet. And thankfully it did because the mount had to be extra wide on the inside to clear the erector tubing. No other mounts that I had would do that, unless you run 2 independent mounts, and I'd rather run a one-piece mount if I could. That's just my personal preference. We've already seen that this thing tracks perfectly well, all the controls are great, and here at 10x it creates a wonderful looking image. Well, at least at 30 yards. There's no real distortion to the image, and chromatic aberration is very minimal. At 400 yards at 1.8x, just take a look real quick at the field of view. Notice where our 3 o'clock position is on that telephone pole. Slow increase in magnification. You don't really zoom in as much as you just enlarge the field of view or just the image that you're seeing. And that's got to be a result of just them and how they decided to set this thing up. I get it. I really do get it. But it's just weird. And honestly, it bothered my mind. For literally 2x in the beginning, the image just gets larger. It doesn't necessarily have you zoom in. And again, I get it, but it really hurt my brain to figure that out. Plus, I hated seeing that much of the scope body at 1.8x. And when we do a side-by-side comparison between this and some newer models, because guess what? I filmed this video, or I filmed this scope last summer, you'll see that the performance differences both at the minimum and the maximum are going to be quite noticeable. Here though, at 400 yards at 10x, we do have a little bit of softness to the edge of the image, but that center is crispy, like a Pringles chip, or actually no, Cape Cod, a jalapeno Cape Cod. I miss carbs. I'm really trying to diet. I got to lose weight. And I'm doing well so far, but day 5 of a keto-ish diet is friggin' hard if you've never done it. Focusing our attention now to our 900-ish yard power tower, the side focus on this thing is excellent. No problems whatsoever getting it down to its minimum about 30 yards and out to 900 yards It's a real quick, easy turn. Again, the nice thing is you have a very large sweep on it, almost 360 degrees, and it really gives you the finesse with the adjustability on the focus. Back when I was doing videos a year ago, I was still doing the side-by-side to see if the image and the reticle were going to stay sharp, but not throughout the entire magnification range, only in the top end like a retard. So here at 10x, you can see the image and the reticle stay fairly sharp even when you're slightly off center. However, that doesn't necessitate that this thing has a wide eyebox. In fact, let's segue into that right now. At 1.8x, you can see that we can get pretty far away from this thing and still look through it. The illumination is not visible in the shadows because it's on the first focal plane. However, if you get even closer to this thing, the image just gets so small and wonky, and it really does frustrate me. Increasing the magnification to around 5x, and we get similar performance to what we'd get on some of the better end LPVOs or higher end LPVOs. It's okay, it's acceptable for what it is. However, it's not anything I'd really write home about. At 10x, any sort of movement, in or out, left or right, up or down, those shadows start creeping in quite quickly, and it is pretty tight. Again, I think it's just a limitation from its overall design, it just being, a very old setup, and it does work when you have a perfect cheek weld like we have with my camera setup. But let me show you what's really impressive on this thing. At 1,000 yards at 10x, we have a wonderful image. But again, this is with 0 mils added to the elevation. So I do my usual spiel, which is add 10 mils and readjust our point of aim. Because if you're actually shooting out at that sort of distance and you're not holding using the reticle, you're going to need to dial. And when you dial, you change all the lenses inside. So does it affect image quality? Well, at 10 mils, the answer is no. It looks still really good at the center point. The trees might look a little bit off, but honestly, the side focus on this thing is really touchy. But again, I like that because we have the ability with that, again, really fine side focus to get everything exactly where we want it. It's a beautiful image plus 10 mils. However, another slight to this thing is its low light performance. Again, the illumination on way too bright and way too dark of an environment gives you that giant ring. And yes, the illumination is so bright, it'll actually hurt your eye a little bit. But low light performance on this thing above 6x is lacking. The image gets really dark. I think my camera makes it look better than how it actually is. But to the naked eye, it gets really dark to the point of almost being unusable. So if you are in the market for something that you can use in a lower light environment, let's say you're hunting or you're shooting tactical stuff at night, this is not going to be ideal. And it could just be from the smaller front objective, but I was still hoping for slightly better performance here. Enough of this bullcrap, C. We want to see some side-by-side comparisons. Well, you got it, buddy. On the left is going to be the USO MR10. On the right, we're going to start with the Athlon Helos BTR Gen 2 2-12. And we're going to pause on this freeze frame here with both of these at their minimum at the exact same target. Granted, they're not filmed at the exact same time of year, but you can understand what I'm trying to get across. Despite the fact that the Athlon is a 2x and the USO is a 1.8, which image looks more true to size to you? I'll give you a second. It's actually the Athlon. The Athlon represents 2x very true to form compared against multiple different 2x's and other variable scopes at 2x. The Athlon gives a very good representation of size, whereas the MR10 does not. Now, I again understand it's part of the witchcraft that is the lens process and what USO decided to do with most of their scopes and have this tunneling effect. And it's something that I just can't get around. I just can't accept because it's not as good, in my opinion. But USO does say you take full advantage of this at higher magnifications, so let's do exactly that. Increasing both of these scopes to their maximum here at 30 yards, 10x for the USO, 12x for the Athlon. And you can see that there is a significant difference of the view looking through them now. The USO has a giant view looking through it at 10x compared to the Athlon. The Athlon is at least average to possibly slightly above average, but the USO is larger, and you do notice that when you get behind it. However, you really take full advantage of that when you're side by side with something else. However, I'm a man that likes using all of the magnification range, including this, the minimum. In fact, when I used this Athlon at Woodland Brutality, it basically stayed at 2x for most of the time. And having that large view through it, the large field of view, the excellent reticle, allowed me to shoot basically every stage that I needed to quite quickly and without much issue. If I had used the MR10 for that match, I would have had a much harder time using it at 1.8x because, number one, the view looking through the scope is significantly smaller, and number two, even though we're at technically quote-unquote 1.8x, the image looks far more zoomed in than what that magnification reads at on paper. Here, yet again, at their maximum magnifications at the same target, you can see that these are not that far off with how the image looks. Field of view might have the advantage by the USO, but the Athlon still has 2x more. So it goes to show which one really starts making more sense here. I don't know exactly which one would be more true to form, quote unquote, but the Athlon is just, in my opinion, a better performer from minimum to maximum than the USO. And I know that actually hurts to say. Again, this USO is a much older technology. I think these are got to be at least 15 to 20 years old, the MR10s. These are still made back when they were in California, I believe. So, yeah, there's some time differences between the two. However, both of them can produce excellent images. And yeah, I'd go with the Athlon as far as the overall package, especially for the price. The MR10 is phenomenal, but the tunneling really does bother me to a point to which I am not happy with it whatsoever. Our next comparison is going to be with the Kentucky Long SwampFox. It's been a while since I've rolled some footage of this thing in, and the reason why I'm pulling it out now is because it's in that same sort of magnification range, but yet again, it's a good comparison using a 2x minimum against a 1.8. And again, the SwampFox just has a better looking bottom end. However, once we crank both of these past 3x, I would say the USO takes the lead and runs with it. The SwampFox is capable of producing a good image, and it's got a decent reticle, and the controls are decent, but the Athlon Helos BTR Gen 2 that we just looked at trumps this. However, I wanted to roll this in again just to show you how the USO looks at 1.8 versus another scope at 2x, and then again at their maximums. And here, again, the USO is the clear victor. I'm not going to spend too much time with the SwampFox because I do believe that the Athlon is a better optic than this. Again, this is just so you could see what the hell's going on. But see, what about the Mark V HD Leupold 2:10? Wouldn't that be a great comparison for this thing? Well, you're absolutely right, and here it is. At both of them at their minimum, we have a very similar view looking through both of them. However, even the USO 1.8x still has a larger view looking through it as opposed to the Mark V. And guess what? When we increase the magnification to their maximum, or again, past 3x on the USO, holy crap, does the view through the USO just defecate all over the Mark V HD. The Mark V is a beautifully crafted, lightweight MPVO that offers basically everything you'd want in that magnification range. But at the same price that this USO was, brand new, again, going on about 2 decades ago. So which one here is ultimately the better performer? Well, I'd still have to give it to the Mark V. Again, the tunneling on the MRO is something that I can't really accept. However, image quality, one versus the other, you'd be hard-pressed to decipher between the two. I think I'd still give the edge to the Mark V, but some manufacturers purposely give the view through the scope a little bit smaller to keep the resolution a little bit higher. Pretend you have a low resolution JPEG that's normal size, let's say 600 by 600. Then you blow it up to 1200 by 1200. The image is going to look grainy, it's going to look pixelated. It's not going to look as sharp, despite the fact it's twice the size. So the same concept applies in glass resolution here with scopes. So you could have a better looking image from a smaller looking image through it, or you could have a really good scope with a big view looking through it and a really good image. So sometimes manufacturers can cheat the system by having that size be played to their favors and their strong suits a little bit better. Here at 200 yards, again, the images are basically indistinguishable.
The USO was truly capable of a beautiful, staggering image. The mill gap reticle I actually prefer over the TMR in the Leupold. It just seems to catch my eye a little bit nicer. It's a little bit easier for me to read. It's got the numbers of what the mill drops are, whereas the TMR is a little bit too basic in that regard. It just doesn't look anywhere near as appealing or as functional, despite the fact I love that the TMR has that center dot for really precise shots, but I still think I would take the mill gap reticle over the TMR any day of the week. That was a lot of words over a long period of time. It's been 25 minutes and 38 seconds since I started this review. I had a lot to say about this USO. I've been patiently waiting to get my hands on one. Then when I got my hands on one and I had all the myriads of problems that came with it, I was sort of let down. But then USO lifted up my spirits with their excellent customer service and warranty work, and I was rejuvenated again. Then I finished all the recording of it, and then the footage just sort of went stagnant. And that was partly due to me. I had a lot of other things come to the channel. Things like my son was about to be born. I had to move my old review desk. If you didn't notice during the unboxing segment, it was still my old setup because this is a very old video. And I just had a lot going on. And then when I finally had a little bit of time on my plate that I can divvy up and shift around, I got bombarded with a bunch of stuff from both suppliers, manufacturers, and of course, lovely viewers such as yourself. So the USO took a back seat. But it's high time that I started going through my long-ass queue of folders that are filled with hours and hours and hours and tons of footage because I'm tired of looking at it. And it's not fair to all of you in case you're looking for a scope like this in the used market. So what do I think of USO as a company? I think they are fantastic. Dealing with them for their warranty work was great, and I do believe that they make an excellent product. I hate the tunneling. I hate the tunneling on this thing. And in fact, most of their quote-unquote magnified optics will have that tunneling effect. I've asked many people that have USO optics, hey, does yours tunnel? And they all say the same thing. Yes, it does. But you don't notice it that much in lower magnifications. I tend to disagree with that. But you know what? Maybe on their higher magnification scopes, it's not as noticeable. Or at least so I hope that's the case. What else do I continue to think of USO? I think they're fantastic. I was upset when they started making scopes in China, but I understand they have to be competitive in the market. Not everyone wants to buy a custom scope. Keep in mind, USO basically started making scopes for the military, bespoke for teams and for agencies across the world with exacting specifications of what they needed. This is a battle-ready and proven scope. I have no doubt that you could take this thing off the gun, bludgeon someone to death with it, put it back on the gun in a QD mount, and then continue to shoot a volley of fire and be accurate and consistent with it. That's, I think, why you buy USO. And because you want to buy American-made when you buy their Foundation series, which are all rather expensive. But let's face facts. A lot of first world country scopes are very expensive nowadays. They're Chinese products I have not gotten my hands on, but if someone sends it in to review, of course I will review it, but I'm not going to be overly excited about it because a company that's literally called USOptics, if their stuff is made in China or other countries other than the US, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. However, this is an American-made scope, and the other USO that I bought after I sold this one is also an American-made scope. And I guess that's a bit of a tease, but yes, I ended up selling this shortly after I finished doing all the video work for it. The reason being, the tunneling. I couldn't get around the tunneling. I tried to. I shot it numerous times. I had this on my Howa back when I still had that Precision 223, and I loved the magnification range. But using it in a dynamic sense at the lower magnifications, especially with how much of the scope body you saw and the view looking through it was so small by comparison to everything else, it just didn't seem well balanced enough for me. If you are fine with how this scope works, if you could find one of these, buy it, and please let me know what you think of it. Or if you've had one of these in the past, again, please let me know what you think. I think it's fantastic, but the tunneling is just a problem. And that's why I'm a little bit leery about going with more of their variable magnification scopes. I guess that'll be a little bit of a hint of what I ended up going with. So, with that, what do I think of USO? I think they're great. I think the scopes are great. They're some of the best feeling scopes I've gotten my hands on. And again, they are tool scopes. They're meant to be used. And with that, that's going to conclude this review. A huge thank you to all of you, my lovely viewers, for making this video series possible. Because without you, I would have no reason to really do this. So, thank you very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Stars subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.